Thank you. So my story begins 2 years ago when I accompanied a friend who used to volunteer in a refugee camp in Athens. I had my 2-year-old son, Noah, with me, so he naturally came with us. When we arrived in the camp, in the hockey stadium, I just put Noah on the floor, and this, what you just saw, happened. He instantly started to run and play with the other kids. And I thought, of course, tiny humans do not care about skin color, visa, religion, money. They just see other human beings and they want to meet. These past years, millions have crossed the Mediterranean, fleeing war and violence in their home countries. Some dance upon arrival on Greek or Italian beaches, thinking they have arrived. The harsh reality is that their journeys have barely started. The survivors will need all their strength to avoid depression and to overcome European current regulation. From this came the idea of the Odyssey project, which I co-founded with the Portuguese photographer José Farinha. We believe that storytelling is a powerful antidote to xenophobia, literally the fear of the others. How can one be scared of people upon knowing their stories and realizing how similar we all are? Refugees are people in flight who seek to escape personal conditions or circumstances found to be intolerable. Their status is protected by the Geneva Conventions of 1949 and additional protocols. Who do you think were these refugees in 1949? Us, post-World War II Europeans. Medias and politicians keep talking about a refugee crisis, but what are the actual numbers? UNHCR statistic report states that there were 65.6 million uprooted persons in the world in 2016. But the vast majority of them, in fact 84%, were actually located in developing countries. This means that the majority of the migration is a south-south migration, while the south-north migration is in fact residual. And these past years, I met a significant amount of refugees who never thought of coming to our countries when they left home. In 2017, 650,000 persons have applied to obtain the asylum in Europe. As you can see, we are very far from a flow, a wave, an invasion of refugees. Especially considering that the European Union remains one of the most powerful economies in the world. Another myth that needs to be deconstructed is the fact that Europe would be receiving the poverty of the entire world. Firstly, and unlike what is commonly said, migrants do not come from the poorest countries, but from transitional countries. Indeed, migration is a very expensive process. It is estimated at a few thousand euros to migrate from Africa to Europe, for example. Secondly, the poorest countries actually have the highest rate of migration to northern countries of their skilled labor. This means that Europe, instead of receiving the poverty of the entire world, is literally receiving the most qualified. And it is one of the economic advantages of recruiting refugees and migrants. The cost of their training has been supported by their home states and not by ours. According to the International Labour Organization, the economic impact of migration on welcoming countries is in fact positive. Migrants integrated to the labour market pay taxes, they consume. Even better, migrants tend to be more entrepreneurial than their local counterparts. Therefore, everywhere in Europe, they contribute to economic growth and employment, often by giving life back to abandoned sectors or geographies. Last but not least, in our individualistic societies, threatened by fragmentation, isolation, and by the rise of extremism, whether terrorism, racism, religious fanaticism, it is key to create a richer social fabric. And I strongly believe, because I have seen it in the field, that a successful integration is the perfect means to achieve that goal. On the other hand, a failed integration will enhance the violence, the hate, the suspicion between the communities. Since 2014, about 800,000 refugees have been accepted in Germany, making it the country in Europe that has taken the biggest amount of refugees by far. As a result, for the first time in 10 years, Germany's economic growth increased from 1.4 to 1.9%. In a small city in West Sweden called Vänersborg, there is one of the biggest legal refugee camps in Europe. 1,500 refugees. Try to picture that. 1,500 persons coming from more than 50 different countries. Traumatized by their journey, speaking different languages, having different religions, different backgrounds. It could have been a catastrophic scenario. Instead, it became a success story promoted everywhere in Europe. A group of refugees started to organize themselves in what they called the support group network. The thinking behind was quite simple. Refugees spend months in the camp waiting for the asylum. In the meanwhile, they get depressed because of the lack of activity and they lose their skills. So the support group network offered them to provide other refugees with their skills for free. Very quickly, a nursery was opened. There were tailors, translators, IT engineers, accountants. There were even dance and theater classes. In 2016, 20,000 services were provided in that camp with a budget of €0. One of the priorities of the support group network was to create connections with the locals. So they organized a beautiful festival celebrating cultures through music, art, dancing, food. So the locals could realize they were just normal humans doing their best. As a result, more than a dozen of businesses have been opened in Vänersborg by refugees, giving life back to a city center that was dying until now because of the development of malls. The chairman of the support group network is actually a chairwoman, Inam. Inam was born in the Gaza Strip. She married her cousin in Abu Dhabi. In 2015, he forced her to move out. The Gaza Strip being closed, Inam had no choice. She crossed Europe, holding her 2-year-old son, her backpack on her back, and holding the hand of a 4-year-old. And she made it to Sweden, and she found the strength to empower herself with the support group network. I could tell you so many stories. I also met Aloysius in London. Aloysius has been imprisoned and tortured in his country, Uganda, because he is gay. Once he obtained the asylum in the UK, he founded a charity that provides LGBT refugees with support because they have very special needs. In London, I also met Emad. Emad was a very famous chef in Syria. He had 3 restaurants in Damascus. He left after he lost everything during the bombing. Now, he and his wife both work as a chef in London. They pay taxes, they have a beautiful house, their 3 daughters go to school, they hired employees and are about to launch a restaurant in London. What if successfully integrating refugees in our societies would help us facing the 4th industrial revolution? We know, and we talked about it today, that the rise of big data, of supercomputing, artificial intelligence will result in widespread automation of work. Oxford University study from 2015 forecasts that up to 50% of all American workers will be replaced by machines in the next 20 years. While new jobs will certainly be created, a realistic outlook cannot ignore the fact that the age of automation will be an age of mass unemployment. The ones who will be replaced by machines will seek their luck by making a living as micro-entrepreneurs, just like refugees who want to integrate into society. Some of the job market services that were created for refugees might even serve as prototypes for the soon-to-be unemployed. I'm thinking, for example, of Action Emploi Réfugiés, a French platform that connects potential employers and refugees, or the support group network. This transformation will occur in tandem with the already growing isolation in our Western societies. The number of Americans with no close friends has roughly tripled in recent decades. And it is the same in the UK. As my Sudanese friend Samir would say, there is no community life in London. Not for Sudanese, not for anyone. There is no connection. People just want more money. A major antidote to this epidemic will be empathy. Remember, we talked about it already today. We will need empathy in higher doses. And it may come from a workforce increasingly adept at soft skills, such as active listening, coaching. At a time when I felt powerless observing the refugee crisis, I created the Odyssey project because I wanted to give back. But I might actually have been the one who received the most out of it. Thanks to the Odyssey project, I met people I would have never met. I lived experiences I would have never lived. I ate Afghani food under a tent in Athens. I spoke Italian with a Syrian in Sweden. I felt my heart jumping in my chest watching Palestinian traditional dance. So now I'm asking you, what is your Odyssey project? If you have a business or lead a company, what are you going to do tomorrow to make it both more inclusive and more efficient? If you are an individual, what are you going to do tomorrow? You can host a family, you can sponsor a refugee, you can volunteer in a charity, you can initiate a conversation in the street. A friendship can start this way. It happened to me. Beyond the economic, cultural, social benefits of integrating refugees into our societies, it is first and foremost a human duty. By dehumanizing them, by denying refugees their humanity, we lose ours. I will leave you with this commemorative plaque found by the French journalist Raphael Kraft while smuggling 2 refugees from Italy to France through the Col de Fenestre. By this call, in September 1943, hundreds of Jews originated from all Europe looked often in vain to escape anti-Semitic persecutions. You, who passes free, remember it every time you tolerate that someone else does not benefit from the same rights as you do. History will judge us. Thank you.